Feed truck's here, the feed truck's here. Three tons of feed for the layer chickens. Think that'll do it. Thank you. This is my weigh ticket from the feed mill. Tells me how much I got. Bill's in the mail. I'm trying an experiment for lunch today. These are pork belly burnt ends. Oh, the camera's misting up. Cut into chunks with Head Country seasoning on them. They look good to me. About 3 hours to cook. It's getting cold. This morning it was about 12 degrees and now it's about 25 degrees, which equals 14 degrees Kelvin. Tomorrow it's supposed to go below zero, which would be negative 12 Kelvin. Hey, I want to show you something. A couple episodes ago, I took apart the starter switch for the MD and we saw how cheaply it was made. This is the glow plug switch that I just put in the 656. I can't remember. Maybe it was in the same video. It melted. So let's do a little destructive testing here and see what we got in here. Well, that's not going to work. I don't know. This is a momentary switch. Oh, look, it's all melted in there. So you're just supposed to press on it for, I only press on it for 10 or 15 seconds at a shot with the glow plugs. There's a spring that makes it momentary. Ooh, I wish you could smell that. It stinks like burned plastic. So that thing that's all encased in burnt plastic there is the contact for the switch. And that's copper. And that makes contact with, you can see a copper end to the unmelted side, and then there's, that all got melted and pushed out of the way, and the switch didn't work anymore. I have a real hard time finding quality parts for old tractors, and for anything for that matter these days. You go to the, quote, farm store, you're not getting farm grade stuff, and it's all our fault. We all demand things cheaper, and that's what we get. You know, we get cheap crap. So what I did is I went to Napa, because Napa, of the few sources I know of, still sells quality electrical parts, and bought a 50 amp momentary switch. That'll do it. I also bought a push button switch at Napa that's like this melty one, and I figured, well, you know, I'll stick that in first and try it. And we'll see. We'll compare them head to head. They were about the same price. You remember where I got this one from that other video. It lasted a week. And the thing that really gets me is I ordered that switch and it was specifically for a 656 glow plug switch. It's not. It didn't last. Howdy cows. Just hanging out. And gossiping at the water cooler. And yes, you can guess what Patty's doing. Eating. Pigs are all snuggled up in the cold. Chickens are fluffy. They have their own insulation. You're fluffy. And angry. It's time to do some messing with the pork belly. I cubed up this pork belly, tossed it in Head Country dry rub seasoning, baked it at 300 degrees for 2 hours on a screen here so some of the fat would drop out. Now I'm going to put it in a bowl and toss it in liquid Head Country seasoning. I like this stuff. Dump it in a dish and back in the oven for another hour, 300 degrees. I have to tow this feed wagon back out to the chicken house. Now, how am I going to do that? I know how. Where are my gloves? Where'd my gloves go, Ezra? Hey! Just a little glamour shot here. Farmo red always looks good in the snow. Here we go. Ah, 3 tons of feed. No problem. Just a little slippery, that's all. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Oh my goodness.
Pork belly burnt ends. The taste test. Looks like General Tso's chicken.
Yeah, it does.
Probably this is one of those things you don't eat very much of. It's rich.
It's good. You don't like it?
It's not as good as in the smoker. I give it 3 stars out of 5. Maybe 4 with the sauce on it. Yeah. Much better in the smoker. That doesn't mean I won't eat it though.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
The kids will like it.
Yeah, they will.
Look at that! Turning radius. Round and round we go! Hey, I'm entitled to have a little fun. I spent many, many hours on this tractor. Working on it. You know, restoring it. Here's another test. We're going to take it out on the road. Push. All right. That muffler sure is smooth. And the engine too. How the differential would sound since I readjusted it. Remember, I took a lot of shims out of it. Hardly any gear noise at all. That's nice to know. You always worry about these sorts of things until you get it together. Turn around here. Back home we go. Yep. Here we are back at home. One finger steering. One finger. You have to excuse my cobbled together microphone. When I was cleaning out the barn in the last video, the microphone fell off my camera and I ran over it. And then it got buried in the poop before I knew it was gone. And so I had to order a new microphone. It hasn't come here yet. That was a great test drive. I saw no issues with this tractor. It's settling in nice, needs to be broke in, and when Hillary and I start cutting wood, as soon as the weather cooperates, I'll use it to drag around some logs and get a little engine brake in that way. The rings haven't seated in it yet. You can really tell after you do a few of these when the rings have seated by the way it runs. I looked back and listed, and this is actually the 5th nut and bolt restoration I've done. By nut and bolt restoration, I mean exactly what I did to this: tear it all down, take everything apart, clean paint, put back together, fix what's wrong. I started out 17 years ago in 2006 doing these. I did the F20 first, and then Super A right after that. Took a little break, did the H, took a little break, did the MD, did the C. Kind of fit in between them were partial restorations where it's more than just maintenance, but less than a nut and bolt restoration. And the 504, I tore down to bare chassis, rebuilt the engine, replaced all of the exterior seals in the transmission and final drives, and painted it. Underneath that loader, which is not painted, is a pretty nicely painted tractor, although it's been quite a few years since I painted it. And I also did a substantial amount of work to the 656. Tore that down to the frame or the powertrain as well, replaced all the wiring, replaced the water pump, replaced the glow plugs, and of course when I first got it, it had a gasoline engine in it. Rebuilt that engine, decided I didn't like it, put the diesel in, and did all that. So I've done quite a bit of work on the 656. So that's kind of the history I have, and you know what? No matter how many of these tractors that I do, I'll never be a mechanic. To a trained mechanic, I most likely will never be a mechanic. I've never had any schooling in it. And the way I learned mechanics was just kind of the same way I learned everything else. For those of you who are looking to get into this hobby, it is really not that complicated. People would like to tell you, some people would like to tell you that mechanics are really complicated. They're really not. If you have the right tools, and you don't require a lot of tools, you really don't. There's a set of sockets and a set of wrenches get you a long way. And some pliers and some screwdrivers. Anyway, I first learned to do mechanical type work from hanging around in my dad's shop. He had a part-time business repairing cars. And of course, my dad is a trained mechanic. And I would hang around the shop when I was a little kid taking stuff apart that he was going to throw away, lawnmowers, carburetors, whatever it was. And got interested in it that way. And then when I was in high school, my parents had bought a 1970 Corvette, and the engine in it was bad. It wouldn't hold oil pressure, and I was hot to drive it to high school. So Dad and I rebuilt the engine in that. It had a 350 in it, and that was the first time I'd done in-depth engine rebuilding. Of course, then went off to become an architect, which in a lot of ways teaches you about mechanics, because one side of architecture is all about how buildings go together. You know, there's thousands and thousands of types of parts and millions of parts in any decent sized building, and the architect draws how they all fit together as a system. And it's kind of the same way with mechanical things, you know, as buildings. They're just collections of lots and lots of parts put together. Came back to the farm in 1996, wanted to start restoring tractors, loved old tractors ever since my grandfather had a Farmall H. We had the MD. That was too complicated for me to work on. So finally, after I got done with the house and the garage and barn here around 2006, I tore into the F20, and then it just went on from there. How did I learn how to do it? Nobody really taught me how to do it. I just sought out the information that I needed. Being a self-starter helps a lot in life. So I bought books, you know, shelf full of books, which I wouldn't even recommend anymore. With all the resources that are available online, just look for what you need to know online, and you can find anything. And read all of the books for the technical manuals for the tractors I'm working on, the Blue Ribbon service manuals, the I&T manuals, the parts manuals, the owner's manuals, all that stuff. Studied and studied and studied to learn by myself. The other thing that's helpful is once you pick a brand, and often you pick a brand based on what you were raised with. A farmer likes a certain brand. Quite often it's the brand his father or his grandfather had, and he's tied to it. That's the way it is with me and internationals. But once you pick a certain brand, there's lots of advantages. You can work on all kinds of brands, that's fine too, but I like working on one brand because I can see the evolution of the brand through many decades, starting with that F20 I worked on, which was built in '39. That was an early Farmall, and I can see certain ways that International did things right up through the '70s that they kept or evolved, and you can see the remnants of the previous generations in the later examples. It makes it easier for me to work on. I also have an easier time finding parts because I know all the good sources for International parts, and I buy my parts all over the place. Depending on exactly what I need, I know where to go that has the best stock of those sorts of things that I need, be it electrical parts, engine kits, a seat, you know, all those different kind of classifications, different bearing seals. So if you're wanting to get into the hobby, it's really easy. Old tractors are cheap. You can pick them up non-running for $500 or less. How much you're going to put into them is a different story. But this is not a labor of making money. This is a labor of love. So I'll never get the money back out that I put into this tractor. It's not a profession where you would buy tractors, do what I did to them, and then sell them at a profit. You can't even make your parts back, much less the hundreds of hours of labor you put into them. So that's my little summary of tractor repair. What's coming up next as far as mechanical work on the channel? Well, I'm going to pull the 756 in. As you remember from last summer, that tractor had some powertrain issues. It's got an issue with the MCV valve, which is that complicated hydraulic assembly that controls the steering, the brakes, and the torque amplifier. When the oil gets hot and thinner, it doesn't work as it should. It needs a new transmission brake. It needs a new parking pawl in the transmission so you can actually put it into park and it'll lock into place and park. And it may need shifting linkage work. It feels pretty tight to me, but we'll see what it's like when I get into it. So that's what's coming up, mixed in with wood cutting and all the other jobs we got on the farm, taking care of the animals, at least until we get very busy again in April. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a little bit all over the place, but the theme here is the Super C is done. I think it's done. Everything works great. I'll see you next time.